Black to play and find the... Don't say it. Nobody say it. Nobody say it. Black to play and find the only winning move. This is... Your like mouth is going to drop open. I'll be right back. Oh, I have the craziest example to show you guys of a move that... You know those engine moves where you're like, what the hell is the point of that move? Then you go through a line, and on move like 8 of that line, this ridiculous pawn move is somehow useful. You know what I'm talking about. An engine proactive. I have the greatest example of that. I gave to a group of like 2300s. I could show you guys if you wanted. Honestly, like stunning idea. And I could walk you through why this engine move is made. I would give people 1,000 attempts to find this move and you wouldn't be able to. Okay, so this is a completely obscure game. Totally obscure. Don't ask me how I found it. I have my methods. This is the World Team Championship Under 26 from 1993, Paraguay against Bolivia. So, I mean, this is not a well-known game at all. So White has just played Queen F1, E1 to F1. So let's take a moment before we do anything and just adjust yourself to this position, because we have to figure out, it's not going to be fun if you don't know what's going on, right? And I have to walk you through very, very methodically exactly what's happening in this position. So what observations can we make about this position? Okay, well, before you look at any moves, it's good practice to start with material. Start by making observations about the way pieces are placed, and then you'll go into the moves. So Black is down a rook for 2 pawns. Black is down a rook for 2 pawns. So it's very clear that either we deliver checkmate or we win back at least a minor piece, or else we will be lost. Now, we can also see that there's a battle going on around the king side. Like, the king side is where shit is happening, right? And it's where Black has to make shit happen, or else Black is going to... White is going to consolidate, and White is probably going to win. So now we can start looking at moves. And the obvious first move, the move that, you know, that everybody and their brother would play, and Black played this in the game, is Queen H3 check. All right? Now, this is not as hard to calculate as it may appear. If White plays King F2, then White gets checkmated in one move, Queen G3. So White has to play the move, King G1. Okay. Now, in this position, the queens are staring at each other, and a queen trade is devastating for Black unless Black can at least get a minor piece, right? So Black has a couple of tempting moves here, but I will save you the trouble, and I will say that the only serious way of continuing the attack, and if you have any specific questions, you can ask, but Queen E3 check is the best move. Queen E3 check is the best move. Yeah, no, if you play F3 here, which I know some of you are tempted by, White's just going to take the queen. White's just going to take the queen. And you can only take one piece at a time, right? So there's a nice line here. Bishop E3 check. You can say, oh, I have an intermediate move. And then I win. I can take the bishop. What does White do in this position? Unfortunately, this does not work out for Black. If White takes the pawn on E2, then, okay, White is up in exchange, but it's a game. Unfortunately, there's King G2. And White takes the rook on H3, and you're down a gazillion pieces. So F3 queen takes H3 fails. Knight takes F3, guys, blunders mate. I mean, like bishop E3 check. And then queen takes H1 as mate. So it's actually quite important that the queens are staring at each other. So for that reason, you need to move your queen. And so you should move it to E3 check first. If King G2, then you get mated. If Queen F2, then it appears that Black's attack has reached a cul-de-sac, but now it's time for F3. Now it's time for F3. Now let's go through the lines. If White plays Queen takes E3, now we have the same exact position as in the line we just looked at, with the exception that here the rook is, there is no queen on H3. I mean, we've literally gotten the same position with no queen on H3. So if White plays King G2, Black does not have a queen that he needs to take. So White plays King takes E2. But at this position, we should realize that now Black has a bishop for the rook as well as a pawn, and you can take a second pawn. Hey, a bishop and 2 pawns for the rook is essentially extra material for Black. Black is doing totally fine here, let alone let alone the fact that white's king is really weak and the rooks are discombobulated. This is fine, right? Hopefully everyone's following so far. But there is a problem. In this position, white has another move. White does not need to take the queen immediately. Can anybody name what you think might be another very calm move for white? So I'll give you a hint. It's taking on f3, but which piece should take on f3? Calculate. Yes, very good, the bishop. Because if the knight takes, then the king is overloaded. It's defending both the rook and the queen, so we take the rook, and white is busted. White loses the queen, right? So bishop takes f3 happens. But black plays knight takes f3 check, right? Okay. Now, if knight takes f3, well, then we already know the drill. We take the rook on h1 and we win the game. But the problem is that white suddenly doesn't have to take on f3. Queen f3 is illegal. Queen f3 is illegal. King g2. Now the line goes on. The line goes on. You might look at this and say, well, wait a second. Black is good. We take the queen with check. King takes f2. And we're in fantastic shape. We play knight takes h2. And we have two pieces for a rook. But still the line goes on. Here, white plays the move king g3 and wins the knight on h2. That knight is trapped. And if you rewind for a second, in addition to playing queen takes f2, black can start with rook takes h2 check, rook takes h2, queen takes f2, and then knight takes h2. And who can remind me of white's move in this position? What is white's move in this position? This is the important line. This is the line you should pay attention to. King g3. And the knight is trapped. The knight is trapped. And in the resulting position, white is a bit better. Now, remember, we are not talking here about like a win for white. Black is winning in the initial position, but with an only move. This is an incredible line. So to recap, we have been calculating the following line. Queen h3 check, king g1, queen e3 check, queen f2, f3, bishop f3, knight f3 check, king g2. Now, either queen takes f2 check and knight takes h2, or more pertinently, rook takes h2 check. Something like this was played and white lost very quickly. White blundered into mate. Knight takes h2, and it looks like black is home free, but king g3 traps the knight. Now, in order to solve the problem, we need to figure out under what circumstances, and I know some of you are good at plugging the position to the engine, under what circumstances this final position would be winning. Under what circumstances? What needs to be the case? What button needs to be pressed for this to be winning for black? Well, the knight has to be able to move back to g4. And so we go all the way back to the start. The only winning move, and I will prove this to you by turning on Stockfish, is h5. And the entire point is that white has no effective move. White's only move here is to go something like rook to d1. I know, Truman. Every other move loses. So let me give you a couple examples. If white goes knight f3, then queen g4 and queen g3 is checkmate. If white tries to run with king f2, then we go at it from the other side. We go queen d2, and this is winning. If white goes queen f2, then we give a check, and we go f3, and we are winning. Why are we winning here? Because after bishop takes f3, knight takes f3, queen f3, you have this check on e3, and we win the game. So trust me on this. I'll show this to you with an engine. But rook d1 is the only move. What do we do now? We already know what to do. Check. Check. f3. Bishop takes f3. Knight takes f3. King g2. Rook takes h2. The same exact line, but after king g3, there is knight g4. We extricate the knight. We have two pieces for the rook, and we have the passed pawn, and we have another extra pawn. This is completely winning. This is chess. I think I actually did a pretty decent job of walking you through this. I feel like I was able to explain the significance of the move h5. This is unfindable over the board, completely unfindable. But this is beautiful. And what the most beautiful thing about this is? It's that it's the only winning move. What I love the most about this is that it is the only winning move. There are no other moves that even come close to doing anything good. Look, here's the proof. Here is the proof. H5 is the only winning move at a high depth. I would never find H5. I don't think Magnus would find H5. And the only way you can find such a move is to reverse engineer the final position. And also to realize, remember, what's so hard about this is that it's a slow move. You might think you're giving white an entire tempo. Like, am I really saying that there is nothing white can do against that combination? Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. But to determine that is incredibly hard. You have to see this line. And by the way, there's some ridiculous lines in other positions too. Here, rook takes h2. Rook takes h2 and f3 is winning. This is amazing. And I have some other examples of this. If you want, I could show you other, like, I did an entire lecture in my last chess camp about these types of moves and like basically how to try to find them. And I think this is a lot of fun. So I can show you guys another really, really cool example. So as you can see, this is quite a well-known game. Kamsky and Anand played a candidates match in India in 1994. That's how long Kamsky has been good and how long Vishy has been good. So this is a martial attack. Very good, Anonymous Savant. This is not the moment yet, guys. In this position, Kamsky found a beautiful tactic. This tactic is beautiful, but it's not, so beautiful that it's something to write home about. So he finds an interception tactic. He notices that the knight on f3 is a type 2 undefended piece. The queen is aiming at it. And he says, okay, if I can intercept the connection between the queen and the knight, and my queen gets to f3, well, there will be hell to pay. And he finds the move rook 8 to e3. Now, the reason knight e3 does the same thing but doesn't work is because it blunders the rook on e2. So knight e3 doesn't work. You have to play rook e3. You have to keep the connection between the rooks. Now, see, here's how this works. If white plays f takes e3, it's very easy. You play queen takes f3 check. Sorry, not check, but mate is unstoppable. One thing I want you guys to notice, rook a8 is totally innocuous. Just king f7. Right? There are no more checks. If bishop takes e3, then black plays queen takes f3, and what's unstoppable here, thank you, Lazy, for the 2 years. What's unstoppable here is the move knight takes e3. I want this to make sense to everybody, otherwise the rest of it won't be fun. This is winning on the spot. You're going to play knight takes e3, and there's going to be a gazillion mate threats. Okay, so in this position, Anand plays a move, and all of the people annotating this game assumed that it was the only move. He plays rook a8 check. And after king f7, he finds a very beautiful defensive idea. It's wrong, but it's still beautiful. He finds the move knight g5 check, distracting the queen from h5. And if queen takes h5 happens, white takes the rook on e2. And because of this pin, white emerges up in exchange. Rook takes e2, bishop takes g5, and it's an endgame. White is winning. So this drives the king out of its shell and leads to a bunch of complications that we'll get to in a second. Yeah, Kamsky plays king g6, and the game continues. We'll get to that in a moment. As it turns out, rook a8 check is a losing move. And there was an incredible sequence, an incredible move for white that leads to a draw. What's so crazy about this move is that it comes absolutely out of nowhere. Out of nowhere. And the defensive concept behind it is absolutely stunning. I'll let you guys think about it for a second. Okay. So I could give you a hint. Ooh, knight g5 is close, but no. It's not knight g5. It is knight e5. Hans in the chat. Yeah, this will be actually interesting to Hans. This is like, and we haven't even reached the pinnacle of it. This is just the start. Knight e5. Now, what is the purpose of this? Well, if rook takes d3, you get checkmated. Oh, no, not like that. You get checkmated on a8. But you might say, well, wait a second, I don't get it. Just bishop takes c5. This doesn't change anything. Well, as it turns out, it does. Because now white plays bishop takes e3. And in fact, black is an only move that draws the game. It is now black who has to be careful. Here's where the point is revealed. You might say, okay, well, wait a minute. We discussed this line, right? We discussed this line. We said black is winning. So how could knight e5 possibly change anything? We just play queen f3 and we're winning. But here was the point of knight e5. Now white takes on e5. And if you play knight takes e3, what's the difference between this position and this position? Well, the difference is only that the d file is open, and that's all white needs. Queen d8 check is winning for white because this leads to a checkmating attack. So in order to draw the game, black has to basically say, I cannot allow d takes e5 to happen on the board, which means I need to give this bishop up. But you need to give it up in a way that forces white to respond. And so the only drawing move is bishop takes g3. H takes g3, queen f3, and now rook a8 check and rook a7 check yields a draw. And the cherry on top is that if black tries to run away from the checks, rook takes g7 check. King takes g7, bishop h6 check wins the queen. And if this is not beautiful, I don't know what is. So a draw by repetition is forced. White cannot make any progress, and neither can black because knight takes e3 is the threat. This is a draw. Rook takes g7 check, by the way. I think it might even lose to king h8. Black cannot take the rook. Okay, so what else do I have to say about this position? Knight e5 is the only drawing move. Instead, rook a8 check, knight g5 check. We go back to the game continuation, king g6. And now we get to the second stunning position. Bishop takes e3. Knight takes e3. Now, Anand finds a really, really cool move. He plays rook d1 to f1. Rook d1 to f1. And in this position, Gadakemsky takes the knight on g5. The position gets complicated and the game eventually ends in a draw. Okay. Now, black has a winning move here that is probably equally as stunning as the knight e5 resource that white had. And here's how I would spell out this position. Now, essentially, we need to figure out what's wrong with king takes g5, because king takes g5 creates a gazillion threats. It creates the threat of queen f3. But to the rescue comes the move rook a8 to e8. All of a sudden, the knight on e3 is attacked just in time. And if you play queen f3, then rook takes e3 holds everything together. If you take the rook on e8, then white takes the rook on e2, and white wins. So Kamsky was forced to play f4, queen e4, and then things get wild. Like, things get crazy here in the game. It's in a draw. So what you need to do is figure out a way to get rid of this knight, but without disrupting the coordination of all of your pieces. So the question, therefore, becomes, what is the only piece that is currently unemployed? What is the only piece that isn't doing anything that could be doing something? The king, the queen, the knight, the rook are all doing something. They're all holding together this attacking mechanism. The only piece that's not doing it is the bishop, and bishop f4 is the only winning move. Bishop f4. And here's the crazy part. If gf4, you get checkmated. Queen g4, queen g2. There's nothing white can do. If white goes knight e6, then you calmly drop the bishop back to h6. Thank you, Anonymous, for the sub. The whole point is that f4 is now protected. The next move is queen f3, and you win the game. Yeah, totally obvious. If hg, you take the bishop and you win. Anonymous gifting to Sausalito. There is nothing that can be done at all to bishop f4. So the whole point is that you need to do this without allowing this rook e8 resource. If white plays rook e8 here, then obviously you play bishop takes g5, and white cannot take on e3 because of bishop takes e3. So you recruit the only piece that's not doing something. And this is why, by the way, h6 does not work. White still has rook e8. And again, the knight on e3 hangs. So bishop f, what do you mean this game antiquated? Like, what do you mean by antiquated? Yeah, bishop f4 is the only winning move. So these two moments, I think, are incredible. The annotators in this game didn't find it. Maybe it was discovered elsewhere. I don't know. I haven't read every book where this game was annotated. But just knight e5 might be even more beautiful, because knight e5 is such a crazy move. You just, to not take the rook here, to not give a check on a8 is crazy. And look at this line. Takes, and then bishop g3. And then a perpetual because you can't go to g6. And then, of course, you have this crazy moment where the only winning move is bishop c7 to f4. But the logic is perfectly clear. Like, you should now understand exactly why this move is made. This move is made because you need to get rid of the knight. Why do you need to get rid of the knight? In order to play queen f3. Why do you need to play queen f3? In order to checkmate on g2. So we do the recursion all the way back. So why can't we get rid of the knight? Well, it's because after rook e8, our pieces are overloaded and the knight is going to be captured. So we have to do it in a way that also preserves the knight on e3, and you play bishop f4. And if you get coached by me, then you can find moves like bishop f4, and you can find moves like bishop f4. You become as good as Hans pretty quickly. And if you become as good as Hans, you get invites to top tournaments, and then you conquer the world. Thanks, Hans, for participating, by the way. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this.